The Battle of Stalingrad remains one of the most brutal and defining engagements in human history. The summer of 1942 saw the German Sixth Army, under General Paulus, sweep deep into the Soviet Union, driven by Hitler's singular obsession with the city bearing Stalin's name. This industrial hub, stretching along the banks of the mighty Volga River, represented not only a vital strategic target, but also an immense psychological prize. The fighting that erupted in the city's heart was unlike anything seen before, quickly dissolving into a chaotic, desperate struggle for every single room and every pile of rubble. Buildings were transformed into fortified positions, and streets became deadly, open killing zones under constant, deafening artillery fire. The sheer ferocity of the close quarters combat defied all conventional military doctrine, turning grand strategy into a brutal series of microscopic, localized fights. German troops, accustomed to the swift, sweeping victories of the Blitzkrieg, found themselves mired in a terrifying war of attrition. The logistical nightmare of supplying an army in a ruined metropolis compounded the tactical frustration faced by the Wehrmacht. The Soviet defenders, clinging fiercely to the western bank, understood the battle's existential stakes for their nation and fought with a fanatical resolve. Every soldier on the Volga's edge knew that retreat was simply not an option, creating a siege mentality that fueled their grim determination. The initial German advance was marked by overwhelming air superiority and massive artillery bombardments that systematically leveled the city. This destruction, ironically, created the perfect labyrinth of rubble, tunnels, and shattered concrete that favored a very specific type of deadly specialist. The traditional front line ceased to exist, replaced by a porous, three-dimensional battlefield where the enemy could be literally above, below, or behind you at any moment. The darkness and confusion of the shattered urban landscape created an equalizing effect, slowly chipping away at the German technological and numerical advantages. This hellish landscape was the crucible that forged a new kind of Soviet warrior, one who specialized in turning the city's destruction into their own personal hunting ground. The desperate Soviet defense began to find its unexpected champions in the shadows and wreckage. Before the streets of Stalingrad were fully engulfed in this inferno, the German military held a profound sense of tactical and racial superiority over their Soviet opponents. The early successes of Operation Barbarossa had reinforced a dangerous hubris within the Wehrmacht's officer corps, leading to a disastrous underestimation of Soviet fighting spirit. German reports frequently dismissed the Red Army soldiers as poorly trained, poorly led, and fundamentally inferior on the modern battlefield. This dismissiveness was particularly pronounced when discussing the Soviets' early attempts to utilize snipers. The German High Command viewed the practice as an outdated, primitive form of warfare, more suited to the forests of the Eastern Front than a grand, mechanized offensive. Snipers were often ridiculed as disorganized nuisance fighters, lacking the precision and professionalism of the German Scharfschützen. They believed that coordinated infantry and armored movements would easily neutralize any threat posed by isolated marksmen concealed in the ruins. The initial Soviet sniper activity, while present, was indeed sporadic and often lacked the centralized command and training to be a truly systemic threat. German officers would openly mock the scattered attempts, interpreting them as a sign of Soviet desperation rather than a sign of emerging tactical adaptation. This scorn led to a significant lapse in German battlefield discipline, especially among forward command personnel. Officers and NCOs frequently exposed themselves carelessly, believing themselves immune to the random, disorganized fire they expected from the enemy. They stood upright while reading maps, lingered too long in windows, and neglected basic camouflage and movement protocols in the seemingly cleared sectors. This ingrained arrogance and tactical complacency proved to be a fatal miscalculation as the battle for the city intensified. The German soldiers were psychologically unprepared for a form of warfare where the highest ranking and most experienced personnel were being targeted and eliminated first. The very notion of being singled out by an unseen enemy, rather than falling in a massed assault, was a deeply unsettling and demoralizing reality. The German command's initial reaction was to deny the problem, which only allowed the nascent Soviet sniper movement the critical time it needed to mature into a highly effective killing machine. The scorn for the Soviet sniper was a direct contributor to the vulnerability that would soon be brutally exploited by one man in particular. Vasily Grigorievich Zaitsev was not a career soldier, but a humble man forged in the severe, unforgiving environment of the Ural Mountains. Born in 1915 in the village of Yelino, he grew up far from the military pomp and high-stakes strategy of Moscow or Berlin. His childhood was spent hunting deer and wolf in the dense, silent Siberian taiga, where survival was wholly dependent on stealth, patience, and absolute accuracy. He learned to move silently through any terrain, to read the smallest signs of disturbance, and to endure punishing cold for hours without complaint or movement. Zaitsev's grandfather instilled in him the ancient wisdom of the hunter, teaching him to take only a single, well-aimed shot to conserve precious ammunition and avoid scaring the game. This rural upbringing provided Zaitsev with an innate, practical expertise that military academies could never replicate, a true master of fieldcraft and natural camouflage. He joined the Soviet Navy in 1937, serving as a clerk in the Pacific Fleet, a life of paperwork far removed from the front lines of the great European conflict. When the war reached its critical juncture at Stalingrad, Zaitsev, like millions of other Soviet citizens, volunteered for a transfer to the front. He arrived in the city in September 1942 as a political commissar in the 1047th Rifle Regiment, part of the 284th Rifle Division. Initially armed with the standard issue rifle, Zaitsev's astonishing skill quickly became evident not with a specialized scope, but with his basic, unmodified Mosin-Nagant rifle. His initial reputation was built on his ability to take 5 enemy soldiers with only 5 shots in rapid succession during one particular engagement. This feat instantly elevated his status beyond that of a mere infantryman and brought him to the attention of his commanding officers. The 5-shot episode became a rallying cry for the 62nd Army, desperately needing heroes to boost morale among the depleted and exhausted defenders. He was soon issued a proper sniper rifle, a precision-modified Mosin-Nagant with a telescopic sight, formally recognizing his unique and vital contribution to the defense. Zaitsev never saw himself as a grand military figure. He was simply a highly skilled hunter now applying his lifelong expertise to a new, infinitely deadlier form of prey. Zaitsev's impact on the German forces was immediate and devastating, quickly transforming the localized skirmishes into a highly personalized form of terror. His hunting philosophy, meticulously applied to the ruins of Stalingrad, allowed him to create positions that were invisible to the naked eye and impossible to predict. He used the three-dimensional chaos of the bombed-out city to his advantage, never staying in one place for long and constantly changing his firing lanes. His preferred method involved a keen study of the city's debris, observing where the German sentries moved and where their command posts were located. Zaitsev quickly realized that the most valuable targets were not the common infantry, but the officers, the commanders, and the forward observers who directed the German attacks. By eliminating the leadership first, he could stall entire German assaults, throw platoons into disarray, and severely degrade the enemy's operational capacity. His daily tally of confirmed kills rose dramatically, transforming him from a local hero into a figure of national significance for the Soviet propaganda machine. The Soviet press began publishing stories of his exploits, painting him as the quintessential Soviet hero, a common man fighting for the motherland with extraordinary skill. He became known for his incredible patience, sometimes lying motionless for over 18 hours in freezing cold just to line up a single, perfect shot. The psychological effect of Zaitsev's silent, pervasive threat far outweighed his raw kill count, which was officially recorded at 225 during the battle. German soldiers began to fear any exposure, knowing that even the briefest glance into a window or the slightest movement could draw a fatal, unseen bullet. The precision of his work instilled a deep sense of vulnerability, especially among the once confident officers who now faced an abrupt and random death. The Germans were forced to alter their tactics, moving only in groups, avoiding windows entirely, and constantly scanning the ruins, which drastically slowed their advance. Zaitsev's success directly led to the establishment of a formal sniper school in the city's shattered landscape, training dozens of other marksmen in his unique urban fieldcraft. His pupils, known as Zaichata, little hares, spread his deadly expertise throughout the 62nd Army, multiplying the sniper threat across the entire front. The Soviet sniper strategy was fundamentally different from the traditional Western military approach, emphasizing coordination, deception, and fieldcraft over pure marksmanship alone. Zaitsev pioneered the concept of the sixes, or the sniper trio, a small, highly specialized team designed for mutual support and maximum survivability. This trio consisted of the primary shooter, an observer who was equipped with better optics, and a third team member whose role was to provide cover, security, and a fresh perspective. The observer was crucial, watching the enemy for patterns, tracking bullet impacts, and most importantly, watching for enemy counter-snipers trying to locate the shooter. The constant movement of the trio was a key element of their survival, ensuring they never fired more than a few shots from the same carefully concealed position. They perfected the art of the cuckoo's nest, constructing numerous, carefully camouflaged, alternative firing positions and escape routes before a single shot was fired. These positions were designed to be impossible to spot from the ground and often used the shattered, multi-story buildings to create complex firing arcs and confusing sight lines. Deception was at the heart of their tactics, utilizing dummies, helmets on sticks, and subtle noise generation to lure German snipers into revealing their own positions. Zaitsev famously taught his students to spot telltale signs of a hidden enemy, like a faint reflection from a scope, a disturbed patch of dust, or the simple repetition of a German movement. He emphasized shooting through glass and thin obstacles to hide the muzzle flash and sound, making the shot's origin almost untraceable to the naked eye. The primary goal was not simply to kill, but to eliminate the enemy's most valuable assets, targeting radio operators, forward artillery spotters, and any German with a map or binoculars. This systemic decapitation of the enemy's command and control structure crippled German coordination and led to a profound degradation of troop morale. The Soviet snipers effectively turned the Germans' own belief in their technical superiority against them, transforming the urban battlefield into a lethal, asymmetric trap. The school of snipers he founded became a psychological weapon, creating a persistent, invisible threat that dictated the pace and manner of German movement in the city. The effectiveness of Zaitsev and his pupils was not solely measured in the quantity of enemy soldiers they killed, but in the quality of the psychological impact they delivered. The presence of an unseen, precision killer operating with impunity profoundly unsettled the German troops' mental landscape. This unseen threat introduced a pervasive atmosphere of constant fear and paranoia that significantly degraded the combat effectiveness of entire units. German soldiers, especially the high-value personnel, found themselves mentally paralyzed, unable to move freely or execute their duties with confidence. An officer could no longer simply walk from one command post to another without the acute, sickening fear of a sudden, instant death. This led to a severe slowdown in communication, troop movements, and the delivery of critical supplies, as every action had to be preceded by elaborate, time-consuming precautions. The snipers forced the Germans into a perpetual state of defensiveness, making them waste vast amounts of ammunition firing at suspected but often empty positions. The psychological terror also led to infighting and distrust, as nervous German soldiers sometimes mistook their own comrades' movements for those of an enemy sniper. The constant dread caused severe combat stress, contributing to a noticeable rise in shell shock, disciplinary problems, and outright refusals to move into certain sectors. The German high command began to see that this was not merely a military problem, but a crisis of morale that threatened the entire operation. The official mockery of the early Soviet snipers turned into a deep, desperate concern as the losses of experienced personnel mounted relentlessly. For the Soviet defenders, the snipers became living symbols of resistance, figures whose success stories were told and retold to reinforce the narrative of their eventual victory. Zaitsev's name alone became a legend on the Russian side and an object of sheer dread on the German side. The snipers had successfully turned the tables, using the psychological leverage of precision killing to combat the overwhelming numerical and material superiority of the Wehrmacht. The relentless, demoralizing success of the Soviet snipers, particularly Zaitsev, could not be ignored indefinitely by the increasingly desperate German high command. The systematic elimination of forward observers and company commanders was having a measurable, catastrophic effect on the German ability to organize and press their attacks. Recognizing the severity of the crisis, the German military decided that a direct and highly specialized response was necessary to restore order and morale. They dispatched one of their most celebrated and highly decorated master snipers, a figure known in the Soviet accounts as Major Erwin König. König was reportedly the head of the German sniper school in Berlin, a master of his craft with a legendary reputation for accuracy and counter-sniper tactics. His mission was singular, direct, and non-negotiable: to find Vasily Zaitsev and eliminate him publicly to shatter the symbol of Soviet resistance. This action was a complete reversal of the earlier German scorn, an official recognition that the Soviet sniper threat was now a critical strategic concern. Koenig's arrival in Stalingrad signaled the beginning of a deadly new phase in the battle, a high-stakes, professional duel fought with precision optics and infinite patience. The German counter-sniper's task was not just to kill Zaitsev, but to do so in a manner that would generate its own counter-propaganda effect. The German command hoped that Zaitsev's death would prove that the Soviet successes were merely due to luck and that German superiority remained absolute. Koenig brought with him superior equipment, including state-of-the-art rifles and advanced telescopic sights, representing the pinnacle of German military technology. He was a master of stalking, camouflage, and the psychological gamesmanship required to lure an enemy marksman out of a carefully prepared hide. His presence immediately brought the German counter-sniper operations to a new level of professionalism, significantly increasing the danger for Zaitsev and his trainees. The battle suddenly transformed from a series of general skirmishes into a focused, personal chess match of movement, stillness, and deadly intellectual cunning. Major Erwin König, whether a single historical figure or a composite of elite German snipers, represented the absolute apex of the Wehrmacht's response to the sniper plague. He was sent with an explicit mandate to resolve the Zaitsev problem and to restore the lost confidence among the German officer ranks. Koenig's arrival was likely cloaked in secrecy, a covert operation meant to bring the full weight of German professionalism against the famed Siberian hunter. The propaganda machine on both sides quickly seized upon the emerging duel, framing it as a mortal combat between the finest marksmen of two warring ideologies. Koenig's reputation was that of an ice-cold professional, a man whose patience was endless and whose precision was unwavering, making him the perfect counterpoint to Zaitsev's guerrilla style. He immediately began to analyze Zaitsev's patterns, attempting to reverse engineer his favorite firing lanes, escape routes, and times of operation. Koenig's initial strategy was to target Zaitsev's pupils, drawing the master out of his deep cover by systematically eliminating the little hairs he had trained. The German sniper's presence was quickly felt by the Soviets. The kill rate of their own snipers began to drop, and several promising trainees were eliminated in rapid succession. Koenig's methods were sophisticated, often involving placing bait, a carefully exposed German soldier, and patiently waiting for Zaitsev to take the shot. This counter-tactical brilliance turned the hunters into the hunted, creating a new, terrifying level of risk for every Soviet sniper operating in the city. The German High Command's investment in this elite marksman underscored the strategic importance of the sniper war within the greater Battle of Stalingrad. The city's rubble-strewn squares and ruined factories became the theater for this invisible, high-stakes duel, a silent battle of wits that could only end with one man's death. Koenig's expertise in reading terrain and spotting the slightest anomaly in camouflage made him an adversary Zaitsev had never encountered before. He understood the psychological vulnerability of a sniper, the moment of hesitation, the split second of arrogance that can lead to a fatal mistake. The culmination of the sniper war came in the intense, protracted duel between Zaitsev and his elite German counterpart, Major König. This was not a rapid firefight, but a tense, almost unbearably slow game of ambush and counter-ambush, stretching over a period of 4 agonizing days. The two master marksmen stalked each other through a stretch of ruined industrial territory, possibly near the shattered Red October factory. Each man knew the other was an exceptional hunter, fully capable of recognizing and defeating any conventional sniper tactic. The duel became a pure contest of fieldcraft, psychological resilience, and the ability to maintain absolute stillness under immense mental pressure. Zaitsev, recognizing the danger, enlisted his observer Nikolai Kulikov and a political commissar to help him find the seemingly invisible Koenig. The German major was a master of camouflage, having reportedly chosen a difficult, hidden position from which he could cover multiple Soviet lines of movement. Zaitsev and his team spent days observing the area, looking for the infinitesimal signs that betrayed a human presence: a flash of glass, a misplaced brick, a wisp of vapor. The tension was so high that any movement felt like a betrayal, and the silence of their hideouts was constantly shattered by the distant, echoing roar of the ongoing battle. They realized that Koenig had chosen a position underneath a sheet of iron plating or debris, giving him excellent cover and a protected firing position. The enemy's location was eventually determined not by sight, but by the subtle behavioral patterns of German soldiers who avoided looking at a particular patch of rubble. Zaitsev's team then deployed a classic deception, a tactic he had taught at his sniper school to lure the German master out of his defensive shell. The final confrontation was a masterful demonstration of calculated risk and the lethal application of psychological trickery on the battlefield. To break the stalemate with Koenig, Zaitsev decided to utilize a bold and meticulously planned deception, turning his opponent's superior patience against him. The Soviet plan centered on creating a false impression of movement and vulnerability that would provoke Koenig into taking a decisive, identifying shot. Zaitsev and Kulikov created a simple, highly visible dummy, a piece of wood topped with an old Soviet helmet and a discarded greatcoat. The dummy was slowly and carefully pushed into a firing position using a rope, simulating the subtle movements of a man cautiously shifting his weight. For hours, the two snipers maintained the deception, periodically nudging the decoy and then waiting in absolute, agonizing stillness. The German major, renowned for his patience, eventually saw what he believed was a momentary, careless exposure of Zaitsev's head. Koenig took the shot, a single, sharp report that sent the Soviet helmet flying, confirming the Germans' approximate position to Zaitsev's waiting eyes. This single act of arrogance and overconfidence, the need to confirm the kill, was the precise moment the German master lost the duel. Zaitsev immediately gave instructions to his observer, Kulikov, to adjust their sights to the precise coordinates of the muzzle flash. He then waited for the moment when Koenig would cautiously raise his head to check his kill, a small but predictable motion from a confident predator. When the slightest movement betrayed Koenig's position beneath the sheet of iron, Zaitsev took his own single, deliberate shot. The German counter-sniper was killed instantly, his fate sealed by the very trap he himself specialized in setting for lesser marksmen. Zaitsev claimed Koenig's rifle scope as a trophy, a powerful symbol of his victory over the Wehrmacht's finest and the final psychological blow to the German morale. The elimination of Koenig proved that the Soviet snipers were not merely lucky amateurs, but masters of a new, terrifyingly effective form of urban warfare. Vasily Zaitsev's victory over the elite German counter-sniper cemented his legendary status and profoundly changed the perception of the Soviet sniper. His actions provided the Red Army with more than just a body count. They provided an inspiring, human story of triumph against overwhelming odds. The duel became a potent symbol in the Soviet narrative, demonstrating that skill, cunning, and resolve could defeat the Wehrmacht's mechanical superiority. Zaitsev continued to fight in the Battle of Stalingrad, not only as a shooter but as the principal architect of the Soviet sniper movement. His sniper school, founded in the city's ruins, trained 28 other snipers, whose combined kill count added significant pressure to the German forces. These new Soviet marksmen, trained in the sixes, tactic, and urban fieldcraft, ensured that the sniper threat would persist and multiply long after Zaitsev left the city. He was later severely wounded in the city by mortar fire, an injury that temporarily blinded him, forcing him to be evacuated for medical treatment. Zaitsev's vision was eventually restored by the renowned Moscow ophthalmologist Vladimir Filatov, allowing him to return to active combat duties. He continued to serve with distinction, fighting in major engagements across the Dnieper and eventually reaching the Prut River in Romania. His leadership and skill were officially recognized with the award of the Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest military decoration. Zaitsev ended the war having reached the rank of captain, a testament to his tactical intelligence and battlefield maturity. His legacy endured not just in the historical records, but in the continued Soviet emphasis on specialized sniper training in the years following the war. The techniques he pioneered in the rubble of Stalingrad became standard doctrine, influencing urban combat strategies for decades to come. His personal account, Notes of a Sniper, became a foundational text for a new generation of Soviet marksmen, immortalizing his lessons in patience, stealth, and deception. The death of Major König and the undeniable success of Zaitsev's sniper school represented a crucial, if subtle, turning point within the greater Battle of Stalingrad. The German advance, already stalled by stubborn, localized resistance, began to falter under the cumulative psychological and material pressure from the unseen snipers. The constant attrition of German officers and skilled NCOs severely degraded the quality of command and control throughout the entire Sixth Army's deployment. German units became risk-averse, moving more slowly and cautiously, which allowed the Soviet defenders precious time to consolidate their positions and prepare their counterattacks. The Battle of the Snipers was a microcosm of the larger battle, a transition from German confidence and aggressive movement to Soviet cunning and psychological warfare. Zaitsev and his comrades ensured that the German army was not only fighting the Soviet infantry, but also battling a pervasive, paralyzing fear of the invisible. This internal erosion of morale and command structure was a contributing factor in the overall tactical paralysis that set in among the German forces. The Soviet counteroffensive, Operation Uranus, launched in November 1942, successfully encircled the entire German Sixth Army, sealing their fate on the Volga. While the snipers did not win the battle single-handedly, they created the conditions of chaos and disorganization that made the successful counteroffensive possible. Their constant, demoralizing pressure helped to grind the German mechanized momentum to a standstill within the shattered city blocks. The myth of German invincibility was irrevocably broken in Stalingrad, and the sniper war played a central role in exposing that vulnerability. The Battle of Stalingrad is widely recognized as the moment the strategic initiative shifted permanently to the Red Army on the Eastern Front. The story of Vasily Zaitsev remains an enduring symbol of how a single, determined individual, using skill and superior fieldcraft, can profoundly influence the course of a massive modern war.